If you're watching this video, I'm sure you're well aware of the phenomenal success of NBA Jam, the arcade game that brought in billions of dollars. But were you aware that there was going to be a baseball game in the same style? Well, I didn't either. It was called PowerUp Baseball, and it's just recently been uncovered for all to enjoy. So let's take a look at PowerUp Baseball in this episode of Local Pixels. Welcome to Local Pixels, the series that highlights Chicago's contribution to video games. Now, this is a really interesting project that was uncovered and archived by Frank Cifaldi and the Video Game History Foundation. They have a huge archive of video game history ranging from internal documents from game companies to interesting dumps like this, PowerUp Baseball from Midway. I used their article as a source, so special thanks to them, and you should really check out their article as it contains interviews from the developers along with instructions on how to play this game right now. Midway, for those of you unaware, was based in Chicago and eventually closed their studio, the remnants of which started NetherRealm Studios, and they're still producing games to this day. They were a powerhouse of arcades in the late 80s and early 90s, and while most of their arcade titles were profitable, their digitization of real people really made their games stand apart from the crowded landscape, and those games are still a household name today. Mortal Kombat and NBA Jam made waves in the arcade scene and later into the home console market. But like most companies, Midway wasn't just content with making one moneymaker. NBA Jam's success showed that people were really interested in games that showcased their favorite sport players but bent the rules of a traditional NBA game, separating it from the simulations. Midway would apply that NBA Jam formula to the NFL with NFL Blitz and NHL with Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey, but one sport was seemingly left out: baseball and the MLB. But behind the scenes, Midway was working on an NBA Jam style baseball game called PowerUp Baseball. It featured the same photo capture technology as NBA Jam, and the announcer was Hawk Harrelson, who is a famous White Sox announcer.
In deep left field, he goes back at the track, looks up, you can put it on the board! Yeah! Hell yeah!
And instead of a joystick, it used the trackball to pitch and hit. Of course, the project never made it to market, but since the Video Game History Foundation is the master of preserving video game history, they had the compiled ROM of the game in their possession for over a year. They just didn't know it at the time. Last year, the Video Game History Foundation announced that they were in possession of the archives of Chris Oberth, a programmer and designer that passed away in 2012. The preserved work of Chris led to the release of a variant of Days of Thunder for the Nintendo Entertainment System, which they released physically to benefit Chris's family. Chris kept almost all of his code that he wrote, and while some of it is sadly lost to history, the complete archive of PowerUp Baseball was well preserved on a CD-ROM drive, which happens to be the only known copy of the game's code. And to think, this sat in a basement for 20 years, and if it wasn't for the Video Game History Foundation, it would have just been a legend. Upon finding the code to PowerUp Baseball, Frank Cifaldi reached out to some of the Midway Development team, who were able to provide some context to the project that was inevitably canceled. But what the information that the Midway team offered paints a pretty good picture of what PowerUp Baseball could have been. And it's a really interesting process. They digitized the motion capture just like they did for Mortal Kombat and NBA Jam, and also like NBA Jam, instead of digitizing every single team, they just filmed one picture with a really odd color scheme uniform, which allowed team logos and colors to be superimposed onto the model player that they used. And while they worked on the motion capture, the biggest part of the project also turned out to be the easiest: getting the player license from the MLB. Roger Sharp of the marketing team from Midway Games already had a pretty good working relationship with the MLB and the Players Association, and they were able to secure a ton of photos to be used and placed on top of the digitized bodies. However, unlike NBA Jam, the MLB didn't digitize the players. Instead, they relied on pictures that were already taken to scan in, and a lot of stuff just didn't turn out correctly at first. None of the noses came out, so artists had to spend time adding in features to make sure that the faces didn't look flat. This had to be done from every angle of the player's face, so it was a long and tedious project. When it came down to designing the game itself, the gameplay would need to be as engaging and easy to pick up as NBA Jam was. And while baseball has had a couple of arcade ports, PowerUp Baseball needed something to really make the gameplay as fast as NBA Jam, so instead of joysticks they used trackballs. And since they were working with incredible technologies, the studio behind didnt, implementing the trackball into the gameplay was seamless. The pitcher would use the trackball to throw the ball, adding curve and speed, while the batter would use the trackball to add significant power to the swing, adding a real fun aspect to the game. Of course, it wouldn't be an NBA Jam style game without some sick moves and power-ups, and PowerUp Baseball was no different. For pitchers, you could throw a regular pitch, or you could change it up throwing like a tornado, which spins the pitcher around and throws the ball ultra fast, or you could throw it underhand to fool the batter, or you can just bean them, forcing the batter to take a base instead of risking a home run. The batter has some interesting moves as well. There of course is the typical bat, but then things get really crazy. One thing I like is the grab and toss, which will allow the batter to catch the pitch and then throw it up and swing, but then the rest are just different strengths of a swing, ranging from huge swings like the karate, caveman, and lightsaber swings to the lighter ones like the one-handed swing. Each action takes power, so you can't be doing karate swings all the time without diminishing your power. And while the game does seem to be in a playable state, no one is exactly sure which stage this particular build is in, so there could be a lot of balancing issues to work out, but you can still play it. Now, I would tell you how to do that, but I'm not a Maim expert, and it does appear that as of the recording of this video, the released version of Maim will not play it out of the box. You'll need to compile a Maim version that will be able to play it, or wait until Maim releases the final version that will support it. So this is a pretty neat concept of a game that was almost finished. There were even cabinets made for the game, and it was tested in a small arcade called Dennis's Place for Games in Chicago. So why didn't it come to market? A number of factors actually, one being the durability of the machine. 2 trackballs with 2 players trying their best to smash the ball eventually led to a lot of repairs, and that costs money. But what really put this project to bed was that it was hard to monetize the game. If you take a look at the YouTube video that the Video Game History Foundation posted, 2 innings lasted about 3 minutes, so a full game would take about 14 minutes, and that's if they're really rushing through it. And you've seen a baseball game before, sometimes the game takes 2 hours and sometimes it lasts about 15. And with no timer, you can't control the playtime of the player, which means that if they're getting 30 minutes to an hour of gameplay from $2, when the NBA Jam cabinet can get triple that, why would you want to bring out that game? So the project was canceled, and Midway would move on to other projects like NFL Blitz and Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey. PowerUp Baseball probably would have worked well on the console, but trackballs had been phased out from the mainstream game consoles for a while. But I guess it would have worked with the traditional joystick though, but I don't think it would be as fun. So that wraps up this episode of Local Pixels about PowerUp Baseball. Again, special shout out to the Video Game History Foundation for uncovering this project and tracking down some of the devs that worked on it. This article written about this game has more interviews that you can check out, and I'll leave a link in the description down below. And if you like this video, please give it a like and share it with those who might find it interesting. And if you're new here and like this type of content, this is where I would tell you to check out other videos, but this is kind of the first Local Pixels in this format. I made an episode about the Chicago Board Game Cafe last year, but it's since closed down and will reopen later this year under a different name from a different company. But if you like this type of content, consider subscribing because I do have more episodes planned. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at snicktendo. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Super Nicktendo, and I'll see you next time.